Sometimes in gardening, you have to break the rules to learn what truly works and what doesn't. On Gentle Herb Living, we often follow time-tested methods rooted in tradition and science. But every now and then, curiosity gets the better of us. So in this experiment, we ignored the classic plant spacing guidelines, specifically for cabbages, kale, and bush beans, just to see what would happen. The results? Let's just say they were eye-opening, both in good ways and challenging ones. Now, spacing rules exist for a reason. Most gardening guides will tell you to give cabbage 18 to 24 inches of space, kale about 12 to 18 inches, and bush beans around 6 inches apart. These distances help prevent overcrowding, reduce disease risk, and give each plant room to access sunlight and nutrients. But here's the thing, not every garden has that kind of space. Whether you're working with a small backyard, raised bed, or balcony garden, following the textbook layout isn't always possible. So we decided to plant these crops closer than recommended and closely observe how they'd adapt. Let's start with the cabbages. We planted them about 10 inches apart, less than half the usual spacing. In the early weeks, they looked fine. Healthy leaves, steady growth, and no pest pressure. But as they matured, something interesting happened. Instead of forming those tight, large cabbage heads we're used to, most of them stayed on the smaller side. They didn't bolt or rot, but they also didn't have room to fully express their natural shape. The outer leaves grew wide and slightly twisted from competing for space and sunlight. But surprisingly, the flavor was fantastic, tender, sweet, and perfect for stir-fries and slaws. While the size was reduced, we ended up with more cabbages overall due to the tighter planting, so it balanced out depending on how you measure success. Next up was kale, one of our favorite leafy greens. We spaced the kale plants just 8 inches apart, pushing the limits on airflow and root spread. Here's where things got interesting. Unlike cabbage, kale seemed to thrive in the tight planting. Instead of growing tall and bushy, it adapted by growing slightly more upright and producing narrower but still abundant leaves. There was minimal pest activity, probably because the dense planting confused the usual culprits like cabbage loopers. The only downside? Harvesting was a bit more tedious because the plants grew into each other, making it harder to see where one ended and another began. Still, the flavor was rich, and the productivity per square foot was impressive. If you're tight on space and want nutrient-dense greens, closely planted kale might be your best friend. Then, there were the bush beans. Traditionally spaced about 6 inches apart, we went down to just 3 inches between plants. At first, the beans loved it. Germination was strong, and the seedlings shot up quickly, forming a lush green carpet. But by the time flowering began, we hit our first real issue: air circulation. The lower leaves became susceptible to mildew and leaf spot due to the trapped moisture and lack of airflow. The upper leaves, however, kept thriving and flowering. We still got a solid harvest, though slightly delayed and with more maintenance needed. We had to prune carefully and increase airflow by thinning some of the worst hit sections. In hindsight, we probably could have gotten the same yield with less disease risk if we had stuck closer to the recommended spacing. So what did we learn from all of this? First, not all plants respond the same way to crowding. Leafy greens like kale are more forgiving and can adapt to tighter spaces without sacrificing too much yield. Root crops and head-forming vegetables like cabbage are more sensitive. They'll still grow, but you'll likely get smaller heads and a messier garden layout. And fruiting plants like bush beans can suffer if airflow is compromised, especially in humid or rainy climates. Second, ignoring spacing rules can teach you a lot about how plants communicate and compete. When we gave them less room, we saw changes in growth patterns, leaf shape, and even pest resistance. Plants seem to know when they're close to their neighbors, and while they'll do their best to adapt, it does come at a cost. But the most valuable takeaway? Don't be afraid to experiment. Your garden is a living classroom, and sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to learn what works best in your unique conditions. Whether you're gardening on a balcony, in a raised bed, or in a tight urban lot, adapting plant spacing to fit your space is a reasonable risk, especially if you're willing to observe, adjust, and learn along the way. If you're a beginner, I still recommend following spacing guidelines at first. But once you get comfortable and want to maximize yields in small areas, controlled spacing experiments, like ours, can teach you a lot. So try it. Play with the rules, watch how your plants respond, and let your garden guide you. And if you've already tried planting close together, drop a comment below and share your results. I'd love to hear how it worked out for you. Thanks for watching Gentle Herb Living. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more regenerative gardening insights, herbal wisdom, and real-world garden experiments. Until next time, may your garden grow wild, wise, and wonderfully.